No one really talks about how long some men are willing to wait for the one person they truly want. Not days, not weeks, months, sometimes years. And it usually starts with something small, something that doesn't sound final. She says, maybe one day. I'm just not ready right now. I need time. And he hears that like it's a promise, like it means not now doesn't mean never. So he holds on to those words, replays them, builds hope around them, and he waits. He doesn't make it obvious, he doesn't beg, he doesn't pressure. He waits quietly, patiently, convincing everyone, including himself, that he's fine. Because when a man sees you in his future, when he's already chosen you in his heart, waiting feels easier than letting go. He tells himself she's healing, she's figuring things out. She'll come back when she's ready. And sometimes it's hard to tell if that kind of waiting is beautiful or self-destructive, because love like that is rare. A man who's willing to pause his own needs, put his feelings on hold, stay loyal to the idea of you without knowing if you'll ever choose him back. That's not weakness, that's commitment. But commitment without clarity can slowly break someone. So if you have a man like that, someone willing to wait while you sort through your life, you can't treat that lightly. Take the time you need, heal what you need to heal, do what you need to do, but don't let him wait if you already know you're not coming back. Because the cruelest thing is letting someone hold on to hope when all that's waiting for them is disappointment. A lot of men won't walk away. They'll keep telling themselves one more month, one more sign, one more chance, not because they're desperate, but because they care. So if you can love him again, do it fully. And if you can't, tell him, don't make him wait just to slowly lose himself loving someone who was never going to return. What people don't see is what waiting does to him. Not on the outside. He looks fine. He still shows up. Still laughs at the right moment, still pretends he hasn't built his days around the possibility of you coming back. But inside, everything is on pause. He doesn't let himself move on, doesn't let himself get close to anyone else, doesn't let himself fully hope or fully let go, because doing either would feel like betraying the future he pictured with you. So he lives in the middle, not chosen, not free, just waiting. He rereads old messages looking for reassurance that maybe he didn't imagine the connection. He remembers how you looked at him, how you laughed with him, how real it felt, and that's what keeps him there. Not obsession, not desperation, memory. He tells himself real love requires patience, that if it's meant to be, it'll come back around. But patience without direction starts turning into quiet pain, because every time you say, I don't know yet, he hears, not now, but maybe. Maybe is enough to keep him holding on. What breaks him isn't waiting itself. It's not knowing whether the waiting means something to you too. He would wait longer if he knew it mattered. He would walk away if he knew it didn't. But uncertainty keeps him stuck, and the longer he stays there, the more of himself he puts on hold. His needs, his timing, his chance to be loved fully, all for someone who may never come back. And that's the part no one talks about. Waiting doesn't just cost time. It costs pieces of him he doesn't realize he's giving away. At some point, the waiting starts asking questions back, not out loud, not in a way he can easily answer, just quiet thoughts that show up late at night when there's nothing left to distract him. Am I being patient or am I just afraid to let go? Because there's a difference. Patience comes with trust, with direction, with some kind of reassurance that the waiting has meaning. But what he has is uncertainty. He's not waiting because he's calm. He's waiting because walking away would mean admitting that the future he imagined might never happen. And that's harder than staying still, so he tells himself stories. That love is supposed to hurt a little, that timing matters more than readiness, that if he just proves he's loyal enough, consistent enough, understanding enough, it'll all make sense one day. But love isn't supposed to feel like erasing yourself. It isn't supposed to require putting your life on hold indefinitely. It isn't supposed to make you question whether your needs matter at all. Still, he stays. His hope is quiet, but it's persistent. He whispers things like, she'll come back. She just needs time. It'll be worth it. And as long as that voice exists, letting go feels like failure, like giving up on something real. What scares him most isn't the idea of her choosing someone else. It's the idea that she might never choose anyone, and he still waited anyway. That he might look back one day and realize he sacrificed his own chance to be loved fully for someone who was never coming back. And that realization doesn't make him angry. It makes him tired, because waiting stopped feeling romantic a long time ago. Now it just feels heavy. And deep down, he's starting to understand something he's been avoiding. Love shouldn't feel like standing still while life passes you by. There comes a moment when waiting stops feeling like love and starts feeling like self-abandonment. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic breaking point. It's quieter than that. It's the realization that his life has been moving around someone who isn't moving toward him. That he's been planning a future with someone who won't even promise a present. He notices it in small ways, how he avoids making plans because what if she comes back? How he turns down opportunities because he doesn't want to feel unavailable when she finally decides. How he measures his growth, his happiness, his healing against whether or not it would still fit her. And that's when it hits him. Waiting has slowly become a way of disappearing. Not because he doesn't love her, but because loving her has started costing him himself. He tells himself love requires sacrifice, but sacrifice isn't supposed to be one-sided. Real love doesn't ask you to pause your entire life without offering anything solid in return. And for the first time, he lets himself ask a dangerous question. If she never comes back, would this still have been worth it? That question hurts because the answer isn't immediate, because a part of him still wants to believe that patience will be rewarded, but another part, the quieter, tired part, knows something has to change. He starts realizing that choosing himself doesn't mean he loved her less. It means he finally loved himself enough to stop waiting in uncertainty. Letting go doesn't erase what they had. It doesn't make the feelings fake. It doesn't turn the waiting into a mistake. It just means he's done confusing hope with a promise, because love shouldn't require you to disappear quietly just to prove you're loyal. And walking away doesn't mean he stopped caring. Sometimes it means he cared enough to stop hurting himself in silence. Letting go hurts differently than waiting ever did. Waiting was familiar, painful but predictable. It gave him something to hold on to, even if that something was uncertainty. Letting go feels like free fall, because when he finally stops waiting, there's no future version of them to lean on anymore. No, maybe one day. No imagined moment where she finally says she's ready. Just silence, and that silence is loud at first. He feels it in the empty spaces where hope used to sit, in the routines he built around the idea of her coming back. For a while he doesn't know who he is without the waiting, because waiting gave his love direction. It gave his patience purpose. It made the pain feel meaningful. Now he has to sit with something harder, grief, not just for her, but for the version of himself who believed love always meant endurance. He realizes how long he ignored his own needs, how often he told himself later, instead of asking for what he deserved now. And that realization stings, because he wasn't weak, he was loyal. He just stayed loyal to someone who couldn't meet him where he stood. Healing doesn't come all at once. Some days he still wonders if he gave up too soon, if one more month would have changed everything. But then he remembers how heavy the waiting felt, how small his world had become, how much of himself he put on hold. And slowly something shifts. He starts choosing himself in quiet ways. He makes plans without hesitation. He opens himself to new moments without checking if they'd interfere with the future that no longer exists. And for the first time in a long time, his life starts moving forward again. Letting go didn't mean he stopped loving her. It meant he stopped abandoning himself. And that's when healing actually began. After the waiting ends, there's a strange emptiness that follows, not because he lost her, but because he lost the version of himself that believed love had to hurt to be real. For a long time, his worth was tied to patience, to loyalty, to how much he was willing to endure without being chosen back. And when that chapter closed, he didn't immediately feel strong. He felt unsure, Because when you spend so long putting someone else first, you forget what it feels like to be a priority in your own life. He starts noticing it in small moments, how uncomfortable it feels to ask for what he needs, how he second guesses himself when someone shows interest too easily, because ease feels unfamiliar now. He was used to earning affection, proving commitment, waiting quietly without complaint, so when someone shows up without confusion or hesitation, it almost feels wrong. Like love should require more suffering than this. That's when he realizes how deeply the waiting shaped him. He didn't just pause his life, he learned to minimize himself. He learned that his needs could wait, that his feelings were negotiable, that love meant staying even when nothing was being offered in return. Unlearning that takes time. He has to remind himself that love isn't supposed to feel uncertain, that commitment doesn't mean self-erasure, that being chosen shouldn't feel like a reward for endurance. Slowly he starts rewriting the rules. He lets himself want clarity. He lets himself walk away when something feels one-sided. He stops confusing consistency with compatibility, and piece by piece his sense of worth comes back. Not because someone else validates it, but because he no longer abandons himself to keep someone else comfortable. He waited because he meant it, but now he understands something important. The right person won't need him to suffer quietly to prove his love. They'll meet him where he stands. Waiting leaves marks, not obvious ones. Nothing you can point to and explain easily. But after someone has waited that long, they don't love the same way again. He becomes more careful, not closed off and just aware, because once you've given that much patience to the wrong person, you learn how expensive your loyalty really is. He no longer rushes into hope, no longer builds futures in his head without evidence in the present, not because he's bitter, but because he knows what it costs to believe too soon. He listens differently now. When someone says, "I'm not ready," he hears it clearly. When someone says, "I don't know what I want," he doesn't translate it into possibility. He takes words as they are, not as promises he can grow hope around. That doesn't make him cold, it makes him intentional. He still loves deeply, still commits fully, but only where clarity exists, because waiting taught him that love shouldn't feel like uncertainty stretched over time. He no longer tries to prove his worth through endurance. He doesn't stay where effort isn't mutual. He doesn't confuse potential with reality. And that makes him harder to lose, not because he withholds love, but because he now knows when to walk away. He understands that choosing someone means choosing himself too. That real connection doesn't ask him to pause his life indefinitely. Doesn't ask him to suffer quietly just to stay loyal. Waiting didn't break him, it refined him. It taught him what love isn't, though he could finally recognize what it is. And when he loves again, it won't be out of fear of losing. It will be out of certainty. The next time he loves someone, it won't start with waiting. It'll start with clarity, because once you've waited that long for someone who couldn't meet you halfway, you stop confusing effort with connection. He won't wonder where he stands anymore. He won't analyze pauses, he won't read into silence or turn uncertainty into hope, not because he's less romantic, but because he's learned what love is supposed to feel like. The next person he loves won't have to guess how he feels. They won't have to question his loyalty. They won't have to wonder if he's serious, because when he chooses fully, but this time, he'll only stay where he's chosen back. He won't pause his life waiting for someone to decide. He won't put his heart on hold for potential. He understands now that real love doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't stretch uncertainty across months and years. It doesn't ask you to sacrifice peace just to stay connected. The next person will feel the difference. Not because he loves harder, but because he loves cleaner, with boundaries, with honesty, with the expectation of mutual effort. And that's the quiet shift no one sees. Waiting didn't make him bitter, it made him precise. It taught him that commitment means nothing without intention behind it. So when he gives his time again, his patience again, his heart again, It won't be because he's afraid to lose. It'll be because both of them are choosing each other in the present. Not someday, not maybe, now. The people who wait the longest are often the hardest to replace, not because they demand attention, not because they make noise, but because they loved with patience most people don't have anymore. When he was waiting, his presence felt easy to overlook. He was steady, consistent, always there, and consistency can become invisible to people who aren't ready to value it. So they assume he'll always be there, that his patience has no limit, that his loyalty is permanent. But what they don't realize is that waiting teaches restraint. It teaches someone exactly how much they're willing to give before they stop. So when he finally walks away, it's quiet, no drama, no announcement, no attempt to make anyone regret it. He just goes, and that's when the absence is felt. Because he wasn't loud, he was grounding. He was the one who remembered, the one who stayed calm, the one who made things feel safe without asking for anything in return. And when that's gone, it leaves a space that's hard to fill, not with excitement, not with attention, but with depth. That's when people realize they didn't lose someone dramatic, they lost someone rare, someone who would have waited longer than anyone else, but chose not to abandon himself anymore. And that's the part that hurts the most. Not that he left, but that he learned how to leave. Because once someone like that is gone, they don't come back confused. They don't come back waiting. They move forward with intention. And by the time anyone realizes what they lost, he's already chosen himself. Waiting was never the problem. The problem was waiting without being chosen back. For a long time, he believed love was proven by how much you were willing to endure, how long you could stay, how patient you could be, how quietly you could hurt without asking for reassurance, and he did that. He waited through uncertainty, through mixed signals, through not right now that never turned into I'm ready, not because he didn't value himself, but because he valued love deeply, but eventually he learned the difference between commitment and self-sacrifice. Real love doesn't keep you suspended. It doesn't ask you to pause your life while someone decides if you're worth choosing. Real love meets you where you are, and the moment he understood that, waiting lost its meaning, because waiting only makes sense when both people are moving toward each other, even slowly, not when one person is standing still hoping to be picked someday. Walking away wasn't easy. It didn't feel empowering at first. It felt like grief. Grief for the future, he imagined. Grief for the version of himself who believed patience would be rewarded no matter the cost. But over time, that grief turned into clarity. He realized something simple but life-changing. Love should feel mutual, certain, chosen in the present, not promised someday. So now, when he looks back on the waiting, he doesn't see weakness. He sees proof that he can love deeply. But he also sees the moment he learned to stop giving that depth to people who couldn't return it. He waited because he meant it, but he walked away because he finally understood that the right person won't need him to wait at all. They'll choose him clearly, willingly, and without hesitation, and that's not something you ever have to earn by putting your life on hold. There's a quiet kind of emptiness that doesn't feel dramatic. You're not falling apart, you're not in crisis, you just don't know why you're here. You wake up, you do what you're supposed to do, you get through the day. But underneath all of that, there's this question you don't know how to answer. What am I actually doing this for? You don't feel passionate, you don't feel called, you don't feel like anything is pulling you forward, and that scares you because everyone else seems so sure of where they're going. Having no purpose doesn't feel like sadness, it feels like drifting, like life is happening around you and you're just present for it, and no one really talks about that part. Not having a purpose doesn't mean you're failing, even though it feels like everyone else got some kind of direction you never received. Purpose isn't something people find all at once. It's not a switch that flips or a calling that suddenly appears. Most people are just moving it forward with something small and calling it certainty. So when you don't feel that pull, you assume something is wrong with you. But a lack of purpose often comes from pressure to have a passion, pressure to be exceptional, pressure to turn your life into something meaningful as soon as possible. And when nothing fits, you feel empty, not because you lack value, but because you're tired of forcing meaning where it doesn't exist yet. You're not behind, you're just in a season where life hasn't revealed what it wants from you. And that's more common than anyone admits. Purpose usually doesn't appear because you thought hard enough about it. It grows out of living, out of trying things without certainty, out of getting bored, out of noticing what quietly holds your attention when no one is watching. So when you feel like you're drifting, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're between definitions, between who you were and who you haven't met yet. Drifting feels uncomfortable because it lacks labels. You can't explain it easily, you can't point to progress, but drifting is still movement. It's the space where you learn what doesn't fit, what doesn't excite you, what you don't want to carry forever, and that information matters. You're not failing at purpose, you're collecting data, even if it doesn't feel productive yet. It's okay if your life doesn't feel meaningful yet. Meaning isn't something you wake up with one day fully formed. Most of the time it shows up quietly, in moments you don't think are important, in things you do without an audience, in small choices that don't feel like destiny. The problem is we're taught to look for purpose as something big, a passion, a mission, a reason that explains everything. So when life feels ordinary or unclear or slow, you assume you're missing it. But meaning isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just learning how to care about something again. How to show up for one thing, one day at a time, without needing it to define your whole life. Not having purpose right now doesn't mean you never will. It just means you're still listening. Not knowing your purpose can actually protect you, because when you feel pressured to decide too early, you end up choosing something just to stop the discomfort. A path that looks good, a goal that sounds impressive, a version of purpose that belongs more to expectations than to you. And then you spend years trying to convince yourself it fits. Being unsure right now means you haven't locked yourself into the wrong story yet. It means you're giving yourself time to notice what feels honest, not just acceptable. Purpose that's chosen out of fear usually feels heavy. Purpose that grows naturally feels lighter even when it's hard. So if you're in the in-between, don't rush to label it. This pause isn't wasted time, it's you refusing to commit to a life that doesn't feel like yours. Purpose rarely starts as clarity, it starts as curiosity, a small pull towards something you don't fully understand yet, a moment where time passes a little faster than usual, a thought you keep returning to without knowing why, but because it doesn't feel big, you dismiss it. You tell yourself it doesn't count, that it's not serious enough, that it won't lead anywhere. So you wait for certainty instead of following interest, and the waiting feels like emptiness, but purpose isn't found by deciding your whole life at once. It's found by paying attention to what makes you feel slightly more alive than before. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need a calling. You just need one small thing that feels honest enough to try. Purpose grows from movement, not answers. Comparing your life to other people's purpose is what makes the emptiness heavier. You see people who seem sure, driven, certain, and you assume they know something you don't. But what you're seeing is confidence, not certainty. Most people choose a direction and grow into it later. They don't start with clarity. So when you compare their path to your uncertainty, you're not being fair to yourself. You're measuring your beginning against someone else's middle. Purpose isn't a race. It's not something you fall behind on. It shows up at different times for different people because it's shaped by experience, not pressure. The more you stop watching where everyone else is going, the easier it becomes to notice what's quietly calling you, and that's where purpose actually starts to form. It's okay if your purpose isn't impressive. Not everything meaningful looks big from the outside. We're taught that purpose has to be visible. A career, a mission, something people can point to and admire. So when what matters to you feels small, you dismiss it. But simple purpose still counts. Being someone who listens well, being steady when others are overwhelmed, creating small moments of calm, showing up quietly, consistently. Not all purpose is loud. Some of it lives in how you treat people, in how you carry yourself through ordinary days, in how you don't make the world heavier just by being in it. If your life feels purposeless right now, it might be because you're looking for something dramatic and missing what's already there. Purpose doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the way you exist without giving up on yourself. Purpose often becomes clearer after you stop demanding that it explain your whole life. When you're constantly asking, what am I meant to do? Everything feels heavy. Every choice feels permanent, every step feels like a test, but purpose doesn't need to be a full explanation. Sometimes it's just direction, not destiny. When you allow yourself to live without forcing meaning, something softens. You try things without pressure. You follow curiosity without commitment. You let yourself change your mind, and slowly, patterns form, not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to show you what feels right and what doesn't. Purpose doesn't arrive when you corner it. It shows up when you give yourself permission to live without answers for a while. Having no purpose right now doesn't mean your life is empty. It means it's unfinished. You're not meant to know everything yet. You're not behind for feeling unsure. You're not wasting time just because you don't have a clear direction. Some seasons are for building, some are for resting, and some are simply for becoming. Without labels, without answers, this space you're in isn't meaningless. It's where you're learning what matters to you by noticing what doesn't. Purpose doesn't arrive as a sudden realization. It grows quietly from the way you keep going, even without certainty. So if all you can do right now is exist, try, and stay curious, that's enough. Your life isn't without purpose, it's just still writing it. Unrequited love is a quiet kind of pain, the kind that doesn't make noise. It just sits with you. It's loving someone who laughs with you, but never looks at you the way you look at them. They're comfortable around you. They trust you. They tell you things. And every time they talk about someone else, you smile, while something inside you cracks just a little more. You learn how to swallow words before they escape, compliments you never say, feelings you never confess, because deep down you already know the answer, so you love them quietly. You notice everything about them, their habits, their moods, the small details nobody else pays attention to, knowing full well you'll never live in their memory the way they live in yours. Somehow you convince yourself it's okay, that being close to them, even like this, is better than being without them at all. You give without expecting, you care without being chosen, you love without being loved back, and that hurts in ways you can't explain, but unrequited love teaches you something too. It shows you how deep your heart really is, how much you're capable of feeling, even when nothing is returned. Just don't disappear inside someone who can't meet you where you are, because one day someone will, and they'll give back everything you once gave away in silence. The hardest part about unrequited love isn't just that they don't feel the same, it's that they're close enough to keep the hope alive. They don't reject you outright, they don't shut the door, they just exist in your life. They text you, they lean on you, they laugh with you, and every small moment feels like maybe you're not imagining it, so you hold on. You tell yourself you're being patient. That timing is the issue, that one day they'll see what you feel so clearly, but deep down, you know you're waiting for something they never promised, and that's why it's so hard to leave, because unrequited love doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like unfinished business. You don't walk away angry, you walk away confused. You wonder if you should have said more, if you should have been quieter, if you waited too long, or tried too hard, and instead of letting go, you stay emotionally tethered, not because you're weak, but because your heart hasn't been given a clean ending, so it keeps hoping, keeps replaying moments, keeps searching for signs that maybe you still matter to them in that way, and that hope is what keeps the pain alive. You begin to wonder why you're always the one feeling more. why you're always the one waiting, why love seems so easy for others but feels just out of reach for you. You start shrinking your needs, telling yourself you don't want much anyway, convincing yourself that loving quietly is enough, but it's not, because caring without being chosen slowly teaches your heart that it should settle for less. You catch yourself doing things just to stay close, being extra understanding, always available, always forgiving. Not because you're weak, but because you're afraid that asking for more will push them away completely. So you accept crumbs and call it connection, and the longer this goes on, the more invisible you start to feel, not just to them, but to yourself. You forget what it feels like to be desired, to be someone's first choice, to be loved out loud, and that's the quiet danger of unrequited love. It doesn't just hurt you, it slowly teaches you to disappear. There's a reason unrequited love is so hard to walk away from. Not just love, it's anticipation. You live in the space of almost chosen, almost wanted, almost enough. Your brain starts clinging to small moments. A long conversation, a shared laugh, a look that might mean something, and those moments keep you hooked because when love isn't returned, your mind fills in the gaps with possibility. You imagine what could be instead of facing what is. And every time you think about letting go, you feel like you're giving up on a future that was never actually promised. So you stay hopeful, you stay available, you stay emotionally invested, not because it feels good, but because walking away feels like loss, even though nothing was ever yours. That's the trap. Unrequited love keeps you chasing closure from someone who doesn't know they're holding it, and the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to separate love from longing. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of yourself that believed it might work. At some point you feel it, the imbalance, you realize you're giving more than you're receiving, and then emotionally, mentally, quietly, you're investing energy into someone who isn't investing back. You plan around them, you think about them, you hold space for them, and they just live their life. That's when it starts to hurt differently. Not sharp pain, but exhaustion. You're tired of wondering, tired of hoping, tired of pretending you're okay with crumbs. You notice how much of yourself is tied up in someone who doesn't even know how deeply you care. And for the first time, you ask yourself a hard question. If nothing changes, then how long can I keep doing this? Because loving someone in silence means you never get reassurance, never get clarity, never get chosen, and slowly, it teaches your heart that effort doesn't lead to safety. That love means waiting, that closeness means sacrifice, and that's not fair to you. Love isn't supposed to drain you, it isn't supposed to make you feel invisible, it isn't supposed to cost you your sense of worth. And realizing that is the beginning of letting go, even if your heart isn't ready yet. Letting go doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels wrong. It feels like you're giving up on someone you care about, like you're betraying something that meant a lot to you, even if it was never returned. You start questioning yourself. Am I being selfish? Am I overreacting? Should I just keep loving them quietly like before? Because walking away doesn't just mean losing them. It means losing the hope you've been holding on to. And hope is hard to release. You've built routines around them, emotions around them, a future that only existed in your head but still felt real. So choosing yourself feels like cruelty at first, like you're the one causing the pain, but staying was hurting you too. Just slower, just quieter. And that's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes self-respect feels like grief. Sometimes growth feels like loss. Sometimes choosing yourself feels worse than continuing to wait. But guilt doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you cared deeply. And caring deeply doesn't obligate you to keep hurting yourself in silence. After you finally choose yourself, something unexpected happens. It feels empty, not peaceful, not freeing, just quiet in a way that's uncomfortable. You're no longer waiting for their message, no longer replaying conversations, no longer building your day around the possibility of them. And at first, that absence hurts more than the waiting did, because unrequited love filled space. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It gave your heart something to hold on to, even if it was hurting you. Though when when it's gone, you don't immediately feel relief. You feel loss. You miss the closeness. You miss the routine. You even miss the hope, as painful as it was, and that makes you question your decision. You wonder if you left too early, if you should have tried harder, if loneliness is worse than longing. But this part matters, because this emptiness isn't failure, it's withdrawal. Your heart is unlearning a pattern, and unlearning always feels uncomfortable before it feels right. You didn't lose love, you made room for it, even if nothing has filled that space yet. One day after the emptiness settles, something shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. You start noticing how much lighter you feel without carrying love alone. You realize how much energy you used to spend hoping, waiting, adjusting, shrinking, all for someone who never met you where you stood. And for the first time, you don't miss them. You miss the idea of being chosen. That's an important difference, because now you know what it feels like to give deeply, and you also know what it costs when nothing comes back. So when love shows up again one day, it feels different. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't ask you to love in silence. It meets you halfway. You don't have to hide how much you care. You don't have to settle for almost. You don't have to convince yourself that crumbs are enough. And that's when you understand something fully. Unrequited love wasn't wasted. It taught you the depth of your heart. It proved you're capable of loving purely, selflessly, fully. But it was never meant to be your ending, because love isn't meant to be endured alone. It's meant to be shared. And one day someone will choose you as openly as you choose them. No silence, no guessing, no imbalance, just love. It hits different when you finally realize you're not as important as you thought you were. Not because anyone said it out loud, but because their actions slowly started saying it for them. The replies got shorter. The effort faded. The conversations that once lasted all night now feel forced, or don't happen at all. At one point, you were their go-to, their comfort, the person they called when they couldn't sleep, the one who always showed up, always listened, always cared a little more than you probably should have. They made you feel like you mattered, like your presence meant something, like you were needed, and maybe that's why this hurts the way it does. Because now you barely recognize the version of them that's talking to you, if they even talk to you at all. You start replaying everything in your head, wondering where it changed, wondering what you did wrong, wondering if you asked for too much or gave too much, or just cared in a world that didn't ask for that kind of heart. Not even about wanting them back anymore, it's about questioning if it was ever real, if the connection you felt was mutual, or if you were just filling space until something better came along. That's the part no one talks about, how being slowly forgotten hurts more than being cut off completely, because there's no closure, just confusion, just silence where love used to be loud. You gave them the best parts of you, your time, your energy, your late nights, and honest feelings, and they walked away like it was nothing, like it didn't leave a mark. But here's the truth you need to hear. You didn't lose your value. You didn't become less important. You just stopped being important to someone who couldn't meet you where you were. And that doesn't mean you were too much. It means they weren't enough. Some people can't handle someone who loves deeply, who shows up consistently, who cares without keeping score. They don't know what to do with that kind of heart, so they distance themselves. They detach, they disappear. But one day, someone else will meet you and won't need reminders of your worth. They won't make you question your place in their life. They won't make you feel optional, because the right people don't forget you. They don't slowly fade away, they stay. And until then, remember this. Being forgotten by someone you cared about doesn't mean you didn't matter. It just means you loved louder than they were capable of hearing. Have you ever felt like you're present but not really included? Like you're technically part of the group, but something always feels off? You're in the group chat, but the conversations seem to move without you. Plans get made, memories get shared, jokes get referenced, and somehow you're always a step behind, trying to piece things together on your own. You tell yourself it doesn't matter that you're overthinking it, but deep down it sits heavy. When you're with them in person, you laugh, you nod along, you play your role, but there's this quiet thought in the back of your mind asking if they'd even notice if you stop showing up. You start replaying everything, wondering if you talk too much or not enough, if you're boring, if you're just easy to overlook. And And the worst part is how quietly it happens. No arguments, no clear rejection, just subtle distance that makes you feel smaller over time. You're always the one checking in, the one who would show up without hesitation if someone needed you. But when it's your turn, the effort doesn't seem to come back the same way. You're there for the moments, but somehow not fully a part of them. It's like being in the frame but never the focus, like being heard but never truly listened to. And no one really talks about how lonely that feels, how confusing it is to be surrounded by people and still feel unseen, to question your place while pretending everything's fine. If you feel this way, it doesn't mean you're dramatic or sensitive. It means you care, it means you value connection, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel like you matter to the people you give your time and energy to. You deserve friendships where your presence is felt, not tolerated, where you don't have to wonder if you belong, because being left out hurts the most when all you were ever trying to do was fit in without losing who you are. You wanted her. There's no point pretending otherwise. You didn't just like her. You imagined a future with her. You pictured small moments turning into something bigger. Late nights, shared laughs, quiet mornings. You replayed conversations in your head, wondering what they meant, wondering what could have been. And somewhere along the way, you gave more than you should have. Not because you were weak, but because you cared deeply. And that's the part that hurts first. Losing someone you imagined a future with doesn't just sting, it shakes you. Missing someone who no longer misses you back feels heavy in a way that's hard to explain. But here's the truth that takes time to settle in. Missing someone doesn't mean you need them. And needing someone who could walk away without looking back isn't love. It's you slowly forgetting your own worth. When you pour everything into someone, you start shrinking yourself without realizing it. You start waiting for replies, waiting for effort, waiting for reassurance that should never have been questioned. You begin measuring your value by how much they choose you, and that's where you lose yourself. Not because you love too hard, but because you love someone who couldn't meet you where you stood. Think about it. Before she entered your life, you existed fully. You had goals, motivation, passions, and a sense of direction. She didn't create those things. She didn't complete you. She simply became a part of your story for a moment. And when that moment ended, it felt like something was taken from you. But nothing essential was ever removed. What you lost was attachment, not identity. You might still care. You might still think about her. That doesn't disappear overnight. Healing isn't about pretending you feel nothing. It's about understanding that love should never make you feel like you're begging to be chosen. The right person doesn't make you question your value or wonder where you stand. They don't leave you confused, waiting, or doubting yourself. So yes, it hurts, and it's okay to admit that. But remind yourself of this. You don't need someone who made you feel replaceable. You don't need someone who couldn't show up the way you did. What you need is to return to yourself, to remember who you were before you started chasing someone who couldn't give you the love you deserved. Because the right connection doesn't drain you. It meets you with clarity, effort, and consistency. And until that shows up, choosing yourself isn't a loss. It's the beginning of getting your power back. Lust will ruin your life if you don't learn how to recognize it for what it really is. Not temptation, not desire, not even attraction. Lust is a signal. It's like a check engine light flashing on your dashboard, warning you that something deeper is wrong under the surface. And most people don't want to hear that. They'd rather numb it, feed it, distract themselves with it, instead of asking why it showed up in the first place. Because here's the truth. When lust starts controlling your thoughts, your habits, your attention, it usually means you're lacking something real in your life. Not sex, not validation, intimacy. And intimacy doesn't always mean romance. That's where a lot of people get it twisted. Intimacy can be connection. It can be purpose. It can be faith. It can be feeling seen by people who actually care about you. It can be having someone you can talk to honestly without pretending you're okay. When those things are missing, lust steps in as a cheap replacement, gives you a temporary hit, a moment of feeling wanted, a moment of escape, but once that moment passes, you're left emptier than before. That's why lust never satisfies. It promises relief, but delivers restlessness. You indulge, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel more hollow, more disconnected, more frustrated with yourself, and then the cycle repeats. Because you're not fixing the problem, you're feeding the symptom. The craving itself isn't the enemy. The lack of awareness is. Lust shows up when you're avoiding something, when you're lonely, when you're stressed, when you're disconnected from yourself. It's your mind trying to fill a void without doing the work to understand why that void exists in the first place. And the more you indulge it without reflection, the more it delays your healing. You tell yourself it's harmless, that it's normal, that everyone does it. But deep down, you know when something isn't sitting right with your spirit. You know when it's no longer about desire and more about escape. This isn't about shame, it's about honesty. Lust is an indicator, a warning sign. A moment where you need to pause and ask yourself, what am I really craving right now? Connection? Comfort? Meaning? Peace? Because until you figure that out, lust will keep pulling you further away from yourself instead of closer to who you're meant to be. Most people don't want to admit this part, but lust usually shows up when you're feeling empty, not when you're fulfilled, when your life feels aligned, when you're grounded, when you have purpose and connection. Lust doesn't scream as loud. It might knock, but it doesn't take over. It only takes control when there's space inside you that hasn't been filled with anything meaningful. That's why lust hits hardest late at night, when you're alone, when the noise dies down, when there's nothing left to distract you from your thoughts. That's when your mind starts looking for something, anything, to feel good for a moment. And lust offers that shortcut. No effort, no vulnerability, no risk of rejection, just instant stimulation. But shortcuts always come with a cost. The more you use lust as an escape, the harder it becomes to sit with yourself. You start avoiding silence, avoiding stillness, avoiding the questions you don't want to answer. You tell yourself you're just satisfying a desire, but really you're training your brain to seek relief instead of growth, comfort instead of clarity. And over time, that changes you. It dulls your motivation. It weakens your discipline. It distorts how you view people, turning them into objects instead of humans. It lowers your tolerance for real connection because real intimacy requires patience, presence, and effort. Things lust never asks of you. This is why people who live in lust often feel stuck, not because they're bad or weak, but because they're constantly numbing the very discomfort that could push them to grow. Pain becomes something to escape instead of something to understand, and healing gets postponed again and again. You have to learn to pause when the urge hits, not to fight it with shame, but to question it. Ask yourself what you're actually missing in that moment. Is it connection, purpose, rest, direction? Because the urge is information, and if you listen to it instead of obeying it, it can lead you to what actually needs attention in your life. Lust loses power the moment you become aware of it. Here's where it gets uncomfortable but important. Lust isn't just about what you want. It's about what you're avoiding. Most people don't struggle with lust because they're overly sexual. They struggle because they're disconnected from themselves, from their purpose, from real relationships, from meaning. When you don't feel fulfilled in your day-to-day life, your mind looks for stimulation, something intense enough to make you forget how empty things feel. Lust is powerful because it hijacks your attention. It pulls you out of the present moment and into fantasy. And fantasy is easier than reality. Fantasy doesn't ask you to change. Reality does. That's why lust becomes a habit, not because it feels good, but because it distracts you from feeling bad. It numbs loneliness, it masks insecurity, it gives you a false sense of control when everything else in your life feels uncertain. But every time you choose that escape, you reinforce the idea that you can't handle discomfort without running from it. And that slowly chips away at you. You start feeling weaker mentally, less disciplined, less confident. You promise yourself you'll stop, then you don't. And now it's not just lust anymore, it's guilt, shame, self-disappointment. You start questioning your self-control, your character, your ability to change, all because you never addressed the root issue in the first place. The problem isn't desire. Desire is human. The problem is unchanneled desire. Desire without direction turns into self-destruction. When your energy isn't going into building something meaningful, it leaks into things that drain you instead. This is why people who overcome lust don't just resist harder, they replace it, they build structure, they strengthen their spirit, they deepen their relationships, they find something worth committing to that gives them purpose beyond momentary pleasure. Lust thrives in isolation, in boredom, in lack of direction. But when your life has meaning, when your days are intentional, when your spirit feels aligned, lust doesn't have much room to grow. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it stops controlling you. Another reason lust has so much power is because it disguises itself as confidence. It makes you feel wanted, desired, in control. For a brief moment, it tricks you into thinking you're fulfilled. But once that moment fades, you're left with the same questions, the same restlessness, the same hollow feeling you were trying to escape in the first place. That's how you know it's not real fulfillment. Real fulfillment doesn't vanish the second the stimulation stops. Real fulfillment gives you peace afterward, not regret. Clarity, not confusion. Strength, not self-disgust. And over time, if you're not careful, lust can start shaping how you view yourself. You begin to associate your worth with how desired you feel instead of who you actually are. You start needing validation just to feel okay. And when that validation isn't there, the craving comes back stronger, not because you're weak, but because your identity is being built on something unstable. This is where self-awareness becomes everything. You have to catch yourself and ask, what am I really avoiding right now? Am I running from loneliness, from boredom, from the work I know I need to do on myself? Lust often shows up when you're avoiding growth, when you're putting off healing, when you're ignoring parts of your life that need attention. The uncomfortable truth is that growth requires sitting with discomfort, requires stillness, silence, discipline, and lust offers you an easy way out of that process. But every time you take that exit, you delay becoming the version of yourself you know you're capable of being. You don't have to be perfect. You're going to slip. You're going to struggle. That's part of being human. What matters is whether you're conscious of the pattern or blindly repeating it. Awareness alone starts breaking the cycle. Because the goal isn't to eliminate desire. Desire is natural. The goal is to stop letting desire control you, to stop letting it dictate your habits, your focus, and your future. When you do that, you don't lose pleasure, you gain freedom. Here's where things start to shift if you're willing to be honest with yourself. Lust isn't just about what you want. It's about what you're avoiding becoming. Every time you give in without thinking, you're choosing comfort over growth. And that choice, repeated enough times, slowly shapes the direction of your life. You start delaying things you know you should be doing. Goals get pushed back, discipline weakens, motivation fades, not all at once, but subtly. You tell yourself you'll lock in tomorrow, you'll change next week, you'll get serious later. But later keeps moving, and you stay stuck in the same patterns, wondering why nothing feels different. And the worst part? Lust makes you numb to it. It gives you just enough relief to tolerate a life you know you're not fully proud of. It lowers the urgency to change, because why face the discomfort of growth when you can distract yourself instead? This is why so many people feel lost, not because they lack potential, but because they keep trading long-term fulfillment for short-term relief. And relief is never the same as peace. Relief fades, peace stays. When you start addressing the real voids in your life, lust starts losing its grip naturally. When you build structure into your days, when you commit to something bigger than yourself, when you start respecting your time, your body, your mind, when you develop a relationship with God, purpose, or discipline, whatever grounds you, lust doesn't hit as hard, because now you have something to protect. You realize your energy is valuable, your attention is valuable, and not everything deserves access to you. You stop feeding impulses that don't align with the future you're trying to build, not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. That's when lust stops feeling like a battle, it starts feeling like a signal. A reminder to check in with yourself, to ask, am I aligned right now? Or am I avoiding something I need to face? And every time you choose alignment over impulse, you get a little stronger, a little clearer, a little more in control. At this stage, you start realizing something important. Lust was never the root problem, it was the symptom. The real issue was disconnection. Disconnection from yourself, from purpose, from meaning, from the version of you that feels grounded and whole. Once you see that, the urge loses some of its mystery. It's no longer this uncontrollable force, it's just information. You begin to notice patterns. The urges come when you're tired, when you're bored, when you feel unaccomplished at the end of the day, when you avoided something you know you should have handled, and instead of judging yourself for it, you start listening. You ask, what am I missing right now? Rest, direction, fulfillment, human connection. This is where growth actually happens. When you suppress desire, but when you replace it. When you choose to build instead of escape. When you put energy into things that give back instead of drain you. Working on your body, your craft, your faith, your friendships. Things that leave you stronger afterward, not emptier. And the crazy part is, the more you do this, the quieter lust becomes. Not because it's gone, but because it's no longer needed to cope. You're not running from yourself anymore. You're becoming someone you respect. You start carrying yourself differently. Your confidence becomes real, not borrowed from temporary validation. You don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. You feel solid just being present, just being disciplined, just knowing you're moving in the right direction even when it's uncomfortable. That's when self-control stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like freedom. Freedom from compulsions, freedom from regret, freedom from waking up feeling disappointed in yourself. You're no longer controlled by every urge that passes through your mind. You won't be perfect. Nobody is, but you'll be conscious. And consciousness changes everything, because once you're aware, you get to choose, and choosing growth over impulse again and again is how you reclaim your life. There's a moment where you finally understand that discipline isn't about denying yourself pleasure. It's about choosing a better one, a deeper one. The kind that doesn't disappear the second the screen goes dark or the urge passes, the kind that stays with you when you're alone with your thoughts and you can actually respect the person staring back at you. You start realizing how much time and energy you were leaking, hours, focus, mental clarity, all going towards something that never loved you back, never built you up, never moved your life forward. And once you see that clearly, it's hard to to unsee it. You begin protecting your mind the same way you'd protect your body. You stop feeding it things that weaken it. Now, this is where restraint becomes self-respect. You're no longer saying no because you're scared. You're saying no because you finally understand the cost of saying yes. You've felt the emptiness after. You've lived the fog. You've experienced how indulging too much slowly disconnects you from your ambition, your relationships, your purpose. And something else changes too. You start seeing people differently, not as objects, not as outlets, but as humans again, with depth, with emotion, with stories. Real connection stops feeling boring. It starts feeling rare, valuable, something worth protecting instead of rushing. That's when intimacy starts to return in healthier forms, real conversations, genuine friendships, moments of stillness that don't need to be filled, a sense of closeness with yourself that you didn't even realize you were missing. And once you taste that, lust loses its grip even more, because now you're building something, a life you don't need to escape from, a version of yourself you're proud of. When that happens, the urge doesn't disappear, but it no longer controls you. It passes like a thought, like a wave. At the end of the day, lust only has power when you don't understand it. When you finally see it for what it is, a signal, not a solution, it stops running your life. You stop treating it like something you must obey, and start treating it like something you observe. And that shift changes everything. You realize you don't need to be perfect to be disciplined. You just need to be honest. Honest about what you're missing, honest about what you're avoiding, honest about who you want to become, because every urge is an invitation, not to indulge, but to check in. Once you start responding instead of reacting, you regain control. You stop letting momentary desire dictate long-term direction. You stop trading peace for pleasure. You stop delaying your growth for comfort. And slowly, your life begins to align with the values you claim to have. Lust didn't ruin you. It revealed the places where healing was needed, the moments where connection was missing, the areas of your life that needed structure, purpose, and depth. And once you start filling those spaces intentionally, lust no longer screams for attention. It fades into the background. You become more present, more focused, more grounded. You don't feel constantly pulled in 100 directions anymore. You know what matters, you know what doesn't, and you act accordingly. This isn't about becoming cold or denying desire. It's about mastering yourself, about building a life where your mind works for you, not against you, where your choices reflect your values, where you don't need escape because you're finally moving towards something real. And when you get there, you'll look back and realize something important. The urge was never the enemy. Ignoring the message was. Staying doesn't feel right anymore, but the idea of never speaking again feels just as painful. And that's the part that messes with your head the most. You're stuck between two choices that both hurt, and no one really prepares you for that kind of decision. When you love someone deeply, your heart doesn't just switch off because your mind finally sees the truth. It lags behind, it holds on to memories, routines, and the version of that person who once made you feel safe. But loving someone doesn't mean you're meant to stay in a situation that's draining you. Sometimes your body already knows what your heart hasn't accepted yet. You feel tense all the time. You feel smaller. You feel tired in ways sleep can't fix. And yet you keep telling yourself to wait, to push through, to hold on just a little longer, not because things are getting better, but because letting go feels like losing a part of yourself. Here's the hard truth. Your heart isn't built to make logical decisions. It moves on emotion, attachment, and hope. That's why you can miss someone who hurt you. That's why you can crave a connection that's slowly breaking you down. And in moments like this, you can't let your emotions be the only thing guiding you. You have to choose clarity over comfort. Walking away doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It means you finally respected yourself enough to stop accepting pain as the price for connection. You're not weak for leaving. You're strong for recognizing that love shouldn't feel like constant survival. It shouldn't hurt every day. It shouldn't cost you your peace. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do isn't staying or fixing or waiting. Sometimes it's choosing yourself, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. You never really liked me, did you? Not in the way I liked you. You liked the idea of me, the convenience, the way I showed up when you were bored, lonely, or needed someone to fill the silence. You liked having someone who replied fast, someone who cared deeply, someone who never made you question where they stood. You liked the attention, the validation, the comfort of knowing someone was always there for you, even when you weren't giving much back. But me, the real me, with emotions, with needs, with expectations, that version of me was never what you signed up for, because the moment I asked for effort, the moment I wanted consistency, the moment I needed reassurance instead of confusion, everything changed. That's when you started pulling away. Replies got shorter, energy shifted, affection turned into distance, and that's when it finally hit me. You were never in this for me. You were in it for what I could give you, the way I made you feel important, the way I listened without interrupting, the way I stayed even when I was hurting, the way I gave love freely without demanding demanding it in return. I was safe for you, comfortable, predictable, but you never planned on meeting me halfway. And what hurts the most is realizing that the person who gives the most usually ends up being the one forgotten the fastest. I replay everything now, every conversation, every moment I ignored my gut. I see how I confused mixed signals for love, how I mistook attention for intention, how I kept telling myself, maybe they're just scared, maybe they need time, maybe one day they'll choose me the way I chose them, but wanting someone to choose you shouldn't feel like begging. And love shouldn't feel like you're constantly proving your worth. I stayed longer than I should have because I believed in potential, because I saw what it could be, because I loved the version of you that only existed when it was convenient for you. And that's the hardest truth to accept, that the connection felt real to me but optional to you. So now I'm done asking questions I already know the answers to. I'm done waiting for explanations that will never come, because silence is an answer, distance is an answer, effort or the lack of it is an answer. You never really liked me, not enough to stay, not enough to try, not enough to choose me when it mattered, and for the first time, I'm not angry about it. I'm just learning how to let go of someone who only loved me when it was easy. I'm choosing myself now, even if it hurts, even if it takes time, because I deserve more than being someone's option when I gave them my everything. If you ever find yourself feeling insecure about the way you look or the way you exist in this world, I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. You are the result of thousands of generations of people who chose love. People who met, connected, cared for each other, and decided to keep going. Every single one of them led to you being here right now. And that alone is something incredibly powerful. I know this idea gets mentioned a lot, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful. Sometimes the most repeated truths are the ones we forget the fastest. You didn't just appear randomly. Your existence is layered with history, emotion, resilience, and connection. Every feature you have, every trait you carry, every part of you is proof that love existed long before you did. You are a beautiful person, not just on the outside, but in the way you carry yourself, the way you think, the way you feel deeply. You are a beautiful soul, and whether you believe it or not right now, people are drawn to you. That's not wishful thinking, that's real. The energy you bring, the presence you have, the way you make others feel seen or understood, those things matter more than you realize. It's easy to let outside voices mess with your perception of yourself. A comment, a comparison, a moment of rejection can make you forget everything good about who you are, but anyone who makes you feel small, unworthy, or unlovable is not someone you should be listening to. Their words do not define you. Their inability to see your value does not take it away. You don't need to look like anyone else. You don't need to act like anyone else. You don't need to change yourself to be deserving of love or appreciation. You already are exactly as you are. The right people will see that without you having to prove anything. Let this video be a reminder today. A quiet one, not a loud or overwhelming one. Just a gentle reminder that you matter, that you are enough, and that your existence is not accidental. Take a moment to breathe this in. Let it sit with you. Let it soften the way you talk to yourself for the rest of the day. You are here because love brought you here, and that alone makes you something special. And if you can still listen, even when it's hard, there's still a way back. It's letting the distance grow so wide that you forget how to listen to the person you once loved without effort. Because the real loss isn't the argument, it's I'm still here. I still care. Let's figure this out together. And the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say isn't another argument. Love survives not because people never argue, but because at some point they choose understanding over being right. Sometimes the only way back to each other is slowing down and actually hearing what's being said beneath the anger. Because love isn't about who wins, it's about who's willing to listen even when it's uncomfortable, even when it hurts your pride, even when silence feels easier. You have to stop fighting each other and start fighting for the version of us that existed before ego took over. Not by winning the argument, not by proving your point harder, not by keeping score of who's hurt who more. If you still care, if there's even a small part of you that hopes things can get better, then something has to change. And now both of you are stuck arguing through the pain instead of talking through it. You're not angry, you're hurting, but the pain comes out sideways. Instead of saying, I'm scared of losing you, you argue over something small that doesn't even matter. Instead of saying, I feel ignored, you shut down. So instead of saying, that hurt me, you raise your voice. Especially as a man, you were probably never taught how to communicate hurt without sounding cold, defensive, or angry. I don't want to lose you. That storm where both people are tired, emotionally drained, misunderstood, and too hurt to say the one thing that actually matters. Every real connection goes through this phase. But here's the part nobody really talks about. You just want to feel seen again. You want to feel like your feelings still matter, like the version of you that made them laugh, that made them feel safe, that made them choose you is still there, somewhere underneath all this tension. You don't want to argue, you don't want to push them away, you don't want to feel distant from someone who used to feel like home. What hurts the most is that deep down, neither of you actually wants this. Now it feels like every conversation is a competition. You're fighting to be heard, they're fighting to be right, and while you're both swinging, nobody's actually winning. You miss when things were easy, when you could sit in silence together and it didn't feel awkward, when laughing came naturally, when being around each other felt safe, not stressful, and you miss how it used to be. You look at each other and it doesn't feel soft anymore, it feels tense, like you're walking on eggshells trying not to set the other person off. It's about tone, it's about who said what, who felt disrespected, who's wrong, who needs to apologize first. The texts start feeling colder, shorter, dry. Calls don't last as long anymore, and when you do talk, it's not about love, it's not about missing each other, it's not even about how your day went. Like you could say something as simple as, "Good morning," and by the end of the conversation, it's, "Why are you talking to me like that?" Or, "What's your problem?" You ever reach that point in a relationship where everything somehow turns into an argument?